maybe the greatest NFL coach of all time, at least one of the greatest, is in the market for a new quarterback. And he is going to be searching for maybe a name that some of you guys are not too familiar with, but could become familiar with in the future. With that being said, I am Colin Bashingle here. If you are new to the channel, we talk about college football. We're doing daily videos all the way until the college football season starts. We're going to be on that grind tomorrow. The video might be posted a little bit later. I got a golf outing in the afternoon, so it's going to be a little bit later, but we are still on track to be able to have another show tomorrow. So that's not going to be something that we're going to miss, essentially, because we're doing other stuff. So make sure you guys come and tune in for that. To make it easier, you could just subscribe and click the like button too if you think that this information is valuable, because if you click the like button and comment down below your opinion on what we are discussing today or anything regarding college football, that's going to help make another person be able to see it. So I would really appreciate it if you guys like, comment down below, and certainly subscribe if you want more daily content. But enough of that self-promo. We're going to get right into what you guys came here for, and this is an update on the spring transfer portal, and we're going to start with the update with Jaden Ott. Jaden Ott is leaving California, a little bit of a bombshell into Justin Wilcox's program, as they have leaned on this guy, multi-thousand-yard rusher. He is a great player, but really productive running back, and anybody who has seen him, tough runner, very, very good, solid backing at the college level for sure, and will possibly be able to project on to the next level. But he's going to try to level up the skill of competition. The early lean and the early favorite is the Oklahoma Sooners for Jaden Ott. And the thing about Oklahoma that is very intriguing is you already have a lot of new there within that offense. John Mateer comes with his coordinator over there at Oklahoma. They're moving around a lot of pieces at wide receiver, and they do have talented running backs in that room. It's just a matter of, are any of those guys proven? And the answer is no. The guy that would be proven in this hypothetical scenario is Jaden Ott. It is still very early in the process, so me seeing that Oklahoma is the early favorite doesn't necessarily carry a whole lot of water going forward. He's still got a full recruitment cycle of the transfer portal to go through in the next couple of weeks, and ultimately we'll see where he ends up. But Oklahoma as the early favorite is definitely going to be an intriguing fit, and certainly a strength and a good add for the Sooners, who try to level up in their second year in the SEC. Talking about Nico Iamaleava, just giving an update here on this situation. The teams that are linked to Nico Iamaleava are different depending on who you ask. But a lot of people that are around me that are loosely following college football, they might be an Ohio State fan. You know, you can see the Ohio State here, and I live right outside Columbus, so I kind of am in those weeds, and they're seeing graphics that mention Ohio State as well as like Colorado and Oregon. And let me just break this down for you pretty simply. Those graphics are baseless. No evidence whatsoever that any of that stuff is happening. There is no traction that Ohio State, Oregon, Colorado, and some of these other schools even want him. All right. I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think Ohio State is looking in the portal. I think they're fine with what they have in their room. I think Oregon's pretty confident in Dante Moore, and Colorado already did their thing in the portal, and they have a stud true freshman coming in Juju Lewis. So when you factor in those quarterback rooms, that's a situation where I'm just kind of like, all right, are we taking these graphics seriously based on nothing? There is nobody of major reporting credibility in college football that is stating that those three teams are involved. Now, teams that could get involved, UCLA and USC, both the LA schools. I think USC at this point might be a little bit less likely, but you know, as far as like all the drama and stuff, I don't think that is something that Lincoln Riley would shy away from, especially with the California kid. Now, I think USC is very confident that Jade Mayava can be the starter this year and lead USC this season to try to elevate them. But certainly bringing in a little bit of competition and telling Nico, hey, you got to earn it because we like this guy. And if the team doesn't buy in and we don't think that you're going to be the better option to win for us, you're not going to be the guy. And they will say that up front to Nico, which is probably why on Nico's end, it's probably not the destination he wants. UCLA, if he's going for the hometown feel, is a lot more desperate for a quarterback. The issue is the talent around him. And that's where John Summerall and Tulane comes into factor here. And they're saying, hey, we might spend a little bit of money. We're going to be interested. Listen, John Summerall is a great coach. Tulane is a fantastic program going back to Willie Fritz. And there's a reason why John Summerall left Troy and went to Tulane. He didn't level up to a Power Four. No, he stayed in the group of five to go to a more invested and consistent group of five team that Willie Fritz kind of built the foundation of. And John Summerall's continuing it pretty well. And if there was ever a G5 team that could be in consideration for the top portal prospect, according to 247, and one of the top, according to On3, I think Tulane would be the one, as crazy as that sounds. And the thing, too, that I'm going to really reference is Bill Belichick and North Carolina has been linked to Nico Iamaleava a lot. And I think the biggest reason they've been linked together, well, there's two reasons. Number one, North Carolina is A-okay when it comes to throwing around a little bit of money. And number two, Bill Belichick and that North Carolina staff has already made it very clear that they want to go after a quarterback this spring. But they already got their eyes on another guy, and this transitions over to the next guy. So just real quick on Nico, wrapping that up, I right now don't know where he's going to end up. I'm really thinking that North Carolina and Bill Belichick's going to fade away from that if Nico Iamaleava doesn't have a complete image recovery in their eyes. In our eyes, the fans, it doesn't matter. In fact, I don't even view Nico very negatively like a lot of other people do as far as the money situation goes. But can Bill Belichick trust him to kind of put the team first, kind of like Tom Brady did for all those years that he coached Tom Brady? That's going to be an unchanging standard with Bill Belichick. But you know, a guy who's transferring from a place that has put the team first, young, talented, an absolute baller, a complete hooper. In his last game, he was amazing. That guy is Gio Lopez over at South Alabama. He's not necessarily going to be a guy that's going to jump off the page the way that Nico Iamaleava does as far as an arm talent perspective and his ability to really sling that rock. But he is still a young player. He is pretty smart, comes from a good system at South Alabama. And Gio Lopez right now seems like a good glue guy, or really a guy to kind of start this rebuild a little bit for North Carolina. A guy like Nico Iamaleava doesn't look like a rebuild is a good fit for him, which is why I'm so conflicted on where Nico Iamaleava is going to go. But Gio Lopez is a good rebuild starter for the next couple of years. He's a guy who got a lot of exposure as a starter and did a lot of growing up as a starter. And with some things going on around South Alabama with the bowl game, as far as guys sitting out, transferring out, especially offensive weapons, guys like Fluff Bothwell, South Alabama relied on Gio Lopez to play great in the bowl game against Eastern Michigan, and he went off. There's something to work with here with Gio Lopez, and they're not going to be at a complete standstill when it comes to, hey, we're returning Max Johnson. He doesn't need to start, but he can come in and compete. And I think that that's going to be very intriguing. Again, as of now, last I heard, it's not like Max Johnson is gone. They have a guy with starting experience that should have been their starter all season last year if it wasn't for an unfortunate injury, and Max Johnson. You bring in Gio Lopez, you bring in that competition, you bring in that mobility that you're going to need from the quarterback position, and you're going to basically have a pretty good competitive dynamic between an upperclassman and Max Johnson and a younger player in Gio Lopez. I think that personally, that's the better route for North Carolina to take rather than trying to go all in on Nico Iamaleava, which could create friction in the locker room, especially guys who have been around Max Johnson. This is going to be an interesting thing to watch for going forward. And the final notable one, I just want to touch on this really briefly because Dakari Collins, another star wide receiver or a good wide receiver for North Carolina State, enters the portal. And it's starting to slip away, I think, a little bit from Dave Doran, who he lost his playmaker in Casey Concepcion, and that was understandable when he hit the transfer portal. But now you lose another weapon, and you're going to have a young quarterback starting for the North Carolina State Wolfpack and CJ Bailey. I don't like the direction that North Carolina State's going. Here we were just within the last couple of years, and even going to into last year, North Carolina State had seemed like they were starting to elevate their program to a more competitive level to where they could compete for a 12-team playoff spot in an ACC championship the way that SMU just did last year, right? It's an open conference in a lot of people's eyes the last couple of years, and NC State was taking strides. Then last year with the transfer portal reliance was a big step back, and that continuity that they could be bringing back from a skill position perspective is gone now. So I'm worried about NC State. We'll keep an eye to see where Dakari Collins decides to go. How about Alabama? All right, we touched on this a little bit briefly yesterday when it came to just reacting to their spring game or A-Day, whatever you fans want to call it, whatever the coaches want to call it, the A-Day showcase. And I kind of talked about how it just sounds like the most consistent guy in the room, the one that's the safer pick is Ty Simpson, and Ryan Grubb comes out straight up. And I think he said this, by the way, before I ended up going live. I just didn't see it before I ended up going live. Ryan Grubb confirms that Ty Simpson is the favorite right now. He says that if they are playing a game this week, Ty Simpson is getting the nod. Now, does that mean the quarterback competition is over? No, Ryan Grubb never said that. Kalen DeBoer or Ryan Grubb has never indicated that this is over. And that's the wrong slide. I meant to slide it over, but whatever. We're going to run with it. When they are saying this, it's saying, hey, Austin Mack and even Keelan Russell with the talent in the room, you guys have to figure out the mental side. I think that's what's going on because I think these quarterbacks know what's going on here. Ty Simpson being the starter at Alabama is essentially the safe pick right now. And I guarantee you what their offense is going to look like in the fall. From Florida State all the way to Auburn, if Ty Simpson is the guy, it's going to be, we're banking on him not to make the mistake. He's not going to necessarily kill you with his deep ball accuracy. He's not going to give Ryan Williams and those wide receivers, Isaiah Horton and others, the ceiling of big play ability that Jalen Milroe gave them, even if Jalen Milroe had his downfalls as well last year. But he's going to give you consistency. He's going to be that steady hand. And that's something that, quite honestly, even if the talent was there with Jalen Milroe and you saw games and glimpses of it, you didn't have that consistency with Jalen Milroe that I think they could possibly have with Ty Simpson. It's a give and take. The upside is not going to be nearly as good. You're not going to have a first half like you had against Georgia, but you're also probably not going to have a disaster like you had against Oklahoma. And I think that's something that Kalen DeBoer is going to be super aware of. We don't want to go with Austin Mack and certainly Keelan Russell just based off of talent edge and in particular with the young quarterback in Keelan Russell. We want to make sure that our quarterback is mentally ready and is able to make the right reads and the right throws. They want him to be a lesser version of, because Ty Simpson is not capable of what Michael Penix was able to do at Washington. I mean, Michael Penix Jr. was a surgeon. He was very accurate with the football, and I don't think that Ty Simpson is going to be that in the intermediate and downfield throw game. I could be wrong, but everything we have seen from Ty Simpson, there is no indication that he's ever going to be that. So Ty Simpson is going to bring limitations to this offense for sure. The big playability of Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton and these wide receivers is going to be after the catch, and the reliance on the run game might be a little bit heavier than what we've seen with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb in the past. And that's okay. You got a great defense coming back. You got a lot of that secondary with Damani Jackson, Keon Sabb. They got experience back there. They got a really good front seven as well with experience. They're going to have a pretty solid offensive line that has a good amount of experience on that as well. So they can lean on being a little bit more of a smash mouth football team this year and beat most of the teams on their schedule just doing that. And there's not going to be too many opportunities for Ty Simpson to necessarily go and win the game, but rather he's going to be the guy they trust to not lose the game. Ty Simpson being the starter at some point against some of these teams, especially in the SEC later in the season, he's going to have to go out there and win a game for you. And I personally have my doubts on whether or not he can do that. I am high on the Alabama team this year, very high on what is around the quarterback, but will the quarterback handicap them the way I believe Kyle McCord kind of handicapped that 2023 Ohio State team? In that quarterback situation, handicap them. Or even, Gunnar Stockton, he was not the reason they lost against Notre Dame, but he wasn't the reason they won. And that limitation concern could even be applied to Georgia last year and maybe even Georgia this year. I am worried about whether or not Alabama can get back to the pinnacle and win a national championship simply off of quarterback play. And I think that's their biggest issue going into the summer. All right, the final thing I want to talk about here is Dan Lanning talking about the transfer portal on Bussin' with the Boys. This is a very interesting take that Dan Lanning had, because he essentially was saying that what the transfer portal has done in college football is really demonstrate the character of some of these programs. And I think when you unpack what he's trying to say is Dan Lanning is essentially saying that when you add the players from the portal, you got to add them for the right reasons. You got to add a player that's going to be committed on winning. They want to transfer to win a national championship. They don't want to transfer for an increase of dollar signs or an increase of playing time, but rather they're going to be bought in to the team. The only guarantee that they care about, these players, for Oregon and Dan Lanning is, I don't care how many targets I get if I'm a wide receiver. I don't care how many pass rush snaps I have if I'm an edge rusher. I care about whether or not we're going to have a competitive team on the football field. I would love to contribute, and I want to earn my contribution. There's a difference between how programs like Oregon and Dan Lanning, coaches like Dan Lanning, Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, etc., approach the portal in comparison to some of these other programs. I would argue that maybe USC kind of fell into that trap a little bit. Maybe a program like Texas A&M could possibly fall in that trap under Jimbo Fisher. And certainly in recruiting, I felt like they did, because they were being sold on players, Texas A&M in particular. They were being sold on players that were just being bought, players that cared more about money than anything. And the irony of this too is Evan Stewart, coming from Texas A&M, really understands that dynamic, because I believe Evan Stewart, Connor Wakeman alike, were leaders in that class who weren't necessarily chasing the bag, but rather saw the collection of talent that was going there and wanted to be a leader of being able to rebuild that program or build that program into a national powerhouse. But then you had so many different egos and so much other stuff going on with the rest of that class that I feel like the perspective of players like that were on that Texas A&M team is a whole lot different, and they can go out and compete. Connor Wakeman doesn't care about money right now. He cares about competing over at Houston. And Evan Stewart, even in Oregon's locker room, he did not make a fuss about being the second fiddle to Tez Johnson last year and the reliance on the throws that were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage for Dillon Gabriel, because the downfield pass game is something that Evan Stewart could potentially thrive with. He didn't complain about any of that. If Evan Stewart and these other guys were like that, number one, they wouldn't be at a place like Oregon playing for a coach like Dan Lanning. And number two, you would have heard a whole lot of noise about it last year, because Evan Stewart did not necessarily fit the style of quarterback that Dillon Gabriel was and the style of offense that they morphed around their quarterback, Dillon Gabriel. He didn't complain whatsoever. He went out there and did his job and was trying to contribute to a national championship contender, and that's what they were. They were the number one team going into the college football playoff, national championship contender. And yeah, you didn't hear anything from Evan Stewart. That's a good example of what Dan Lanning is talking about. You use the portal as a leverage tool, and it's mutually beneficial. You bring in great players who care about winning. That's number one. And number two, you bring in players because you have a position of need. And if you are doing that and you're not just bringing in players because, look, they're really talented, they want this money, let's get them. If you do that, you're asking for a whole lot of issues. You're asking for that talent that you acquire to underperform based on their star rating or their blue chip ratio that the team ends up having, because they add a bunch of high caliber, talented transfers, but they're relying on money. The character of the program that Dan Lanning references here is very valid. And there's a reason why teams that have used the portal, like Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia, they have used the portal in the correct way, and they are not just trying to buy out players. And those are the teams that are going to contend in the transfer portal and the NIL era. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Make sure you like that video before you go. I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.